You know, the one thing about the Zoom calls is the awkward like on and off, and like you need like that conference like soup up music where you got something going on in the background and everybody's getting ready.
I know, I don't think our team has figured out how to do background music on these yet, but maybe next month. That'll be the goal, is to get some.
All right. All right. Well, I wasn't critiquing. I was just saying,
No.
just like that, when you're looking to leave a Zoom meeting and you can't find the button, and you're like, oh, this is like you're like in that awkward space where you're both staring at each other trying to find it.
That's funny. So I know Jessica mentioned this, but we'll give it a few more minutes before we get started as people roll in, as it is a Friday morning and it might be a little slow going. Well, I say let's get started. I know that everyone has precious time on this Friday before a hopefully gorgeous weekend. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on today's Small Business Series conversation sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield. My name is Kelsey McKeag and I am part of the Southwest Michigan First Team. This series of small business discussions was specifically designed to strengthen and grow our small business community. And we hope these virtual meetings will bring together the knowledge of experts, as well as foster discussion between community leaders and small business owners, and hopefully focus on topics that are important to you. So before we jump in, I did want to cover a few Zoom housekeeping items. If you can remain muted for the entire call, that would be much appreciated. We want to make sure everyone can hear. And if any questions do arise throughout the presentation for our speakers, please feel free to put them into the chat box, which should be located at the bottom or side of your screen. Jessica will be monitoring the chat and we will do our best to field your questions to our speakers. And finally, I did want to make you all aware that this Zoom call will be recorded. So before we jump in, similar to last month's call, we wanted to do a quick poll to see who's in the room. So Jessica, if you could launch that poll, please. So just 3 simple questions. Which of the following best describes your role? What industry are you in? And then what do you feel is your biggest weakness when it comes to marketing and branding? So we'll give it a minute or two to have everybody answer the poll. We'll give it a few more seconds.
Got 4 more of you. All right, at 17, I'm going to call it.
Perfect. So let's see those results. Wonderful. So we have a lot of business owners in the room, and then looks like a lot of others. So if you are other in terms of industry, if you wouldn't mind posting that in the chat box to help us see what industry you're working in. And then in terms of the biggest weakness when it comes to marketing and branding, connecting with the right customers. So hopefully we will be able to give you some tips and tricks to answer those questions, and we will get started. So this morning we are joined by Con & Venus of Con & Venus & Company, Katrina Reed of CSM Group, and Jessica Thompson of the Be Joyful Shop to dive into the complex world of branding, marketing, and advertising. Our fantastic panel of experts will be sharing some tips, tricks, and best practices. So this morning we will start with Conan, owner at Con & Venus & Company. Thank you so much for joining us, Conan.
Thanks for having me.
So to get us started, can you share with us what Con and Venus and Company does and your role there?
Sure. I'm the owner of Common Venus and Company, and we are a modern advertising agency. So we help our clients get their message out to the right customer, which seems to be a challenge for a lot of folks listed here. We also do creative services. We do a ton of branding and rebranding services. And I personally have a strong background in digital marketing and advertising and social.
Awesome. So what are 2 or 3 important components that companies should be exploring when looking to create a strong brand identity?
It's a big one to start the morning with. I think the 3 big things that you need to do is, first of all, as a business, and again, to get deep this morning, is kind of ask yourself, who are you? What is your personality? What differentiates you from your competitors and your within your industry? And then how do you properly reflect that in a way that you feel represents your business and your products, and that you're comfortable with too? Because I think the other thing with brand is you need to be comfortable with it yourself and feel that it authentically represents yourself in order to be out there. The next thing, again, going to some of the challenges that people have, is who's your customer? Who's your core audience? What resonates with them? Who are they currently buying from that's within your competitive set? And then also, who are they buying from in general? What do they look for? Do you fit into that set? And do you look like something that they would respond to positively? And then you need to challenge yourself. Does it fit what I call the 3 T's, which is it trustworthy? You always need to come across as trustworthy and credible and professional. Is it trademarkable? So meaning, is it unique? Does it not feel like you're doing something else? And then lastly, which a lot of brands miss, younger brands, is it timeless? Does it feel like something that will last for a long time? So a lot of times with that, it can come down to font choice. It can come down to colors that you're using. Is it just something that you can that looks like it's within the time, but also can carry on and is traditional? And then Mark, who's my creative director and actually on the call, would kill me if I didn't say you need to make sure you're executing that consistently and being consistent in how you're representing yourself as a brand throughout. You'll see the biggest, most successful brands do that.
That's great. So in your experience, what have been the most effective means for companies to broaden their reach? So when they're looking at those 3 T's and a C in terms of consistency, is it typically social media, website, word of mouth, or just like signage and branding around town?
Mm-hmm. Well, aside from wearing a branded hat on your Zoom call, the the other thing that you can do, first of all, I mean, word of mouth is what everybody's looking for. Everybody wants word of mouth because people trust their neighbors and their family members way more than they do any advertising or marketing. But that's a really challenging thing to get. So you have to execute and get people to be aware of your brand first before you can really get that word of mouth. With word of mouth, though, I would definitely, if you can, a referral program is great for word of mouth. Making sure that you're also sharing as many ratings and customer reviews as you can, and getting those from your customers and clients is really important too. The real answer to that after that, though, is it really kind of depends on what kind of business you are and where you are. If you're a local business, and if if you're directly in Kalamazoo, it might be really beneficial for you to make sure you do have signage around town. If you're a roofing business, make sure you get your customer to allow you to put your sign in their yard and do those kind of things, which can be low cost and can really be effective in getting people to know that you're there. If you're a regional player, I have a client who does services within Western Michigan, and a lot of where he gets his leads, which we help him with, is through pay-per-click advertising and making sure that you're there and present when people are searching for the services that you offer, that they find you and know how to connect with you. And then when you are larger, sometimes the biggest challenge is just making sure people know who you are. So some of the larger companies, CPG companies that we work with, it's all about getting that social awareness, the social reach, getting out there in Google advertising and advertising in general to drive just broader awareness, so people are aware of your business and company.
So you would say then it's pretty industry specific. So obviously, if you're a restaurant versus maybe a manufacturer, you're going to follow completely different paths.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes back again to understanding the client and the customer, because then you need to know where you can hit your customer. A manufacturer is going to do things very differently, and how they would reach out to. I mean, the first thing I would recommend to them are, going into trade publications and making sure that they are there and looking at those conferences. And then still, though, with all of them, social can work. It just depends on the social platform you choose. And it also depends on how you're approaching it and how you're targeting your audience.
Those are good things to know.
One last thing I'll say,
Yeah.
sorry, the last thing I'll say though with social is if you aren't, it can cost a lot, it can be expensive. And if you aren't spending a lot, you need to be patient because it takes time to grow an audience and it takes time to build your social. So.
That's good to know, because I know that social seems to be the the hot topic these days of how to get more followers and engage your audience. So it
Yep.
takes time, which is good to know. So what should business owners be asking themselves when starting to create a marketing strategy, if they're kind of to dive into the pool for the first time?
Yeah. The first thing you need to ask yourself is what are your business goals and how do you translate those into marketing goals? Because you shouldn't do any marketing effort without being able to measure the success. And even if it's small, like let's say you have 100 people that follow you on Facebook and you want to grow that audience. Well, set a metric and also determine what that's going to do for you for the brand. So always define your marketing goals and make sure they're tied directly to what your business goals are. The next, and again, I'll bring it up, it hits with what people responded in the survey. You really need to know your audience, like really get to understand who your core audience is, look at who they're working with. You can even go so far sometimes within social to look at the people that are following you on social, go to their profiles, see what other brands and products they're following to understand that and really create a persona. It's a tried and true practice and it really does work. Create a couple personas that are your personas and exactly who you're trying to market to. And that will really help guide you on how you should execute and how you should communicate. And then the last thing, and probably the most important, is what's your budget? Define your budget, because if you have a $100 budget, it's very different than if you have a $100,000 budget on how you're going to execute. And a word of advice there too, just on my side as a marketer, we run into this, and I'm sure every marketer and designer would agree. There's this budget game where you work with clients and they don't necessarily want to tell you their budget, and then they want to know what your costs are. And I would say if you're working with an effective marketer or working with an effective designer, just tell them what your budget is, because then they will tell you what they can deliver within that budget based on what your goals are and based on what your marketing strategy is. But you need to be as clear on your budget as you are on the other two items too.
So it's having those uncomfortable cost conversations, but those
Exactly.
will save you in the long run because you'll get, what you want. So I know when we had discussed on our pre-call, we had talked a little bit about this idea of posting content. So talking about how business owners are the expert in their field. Can you dive a little deeper of what businesses can do to get content out there and how it can help their brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, this is advice for anybody, and this is something that you can do for free once you get off this call. Everybody has been on sales calls or they work with their sales staff, depending on your size. Sit down with your sales team or sit down with yourself and go over what are the top 5 to 10 questions that your customers are asking you. Document those questions and document them thoroughly, and then that is your content. That if you don't have that out on your website, and whether it's in your website subpages or as a blog post, and your competitors do, they're going to find your competitors when they're searching for you online, because they won't be searching for you. They'll be asking those questions. I'm sure everybody on this call right now starts looking for anything, whatever their question is, by asking the Google. Type in the question and just see what comes out. Your customers are doing the exact same thing, and they're doing the exact same thing for your services. And I know that there's a lot of concern of, I don't want to give up any company secrets. And you do need to be careful about that. But most of the time, it's amazing. The more information you give, the more interested people are in working with you because they view you as a trustworthy resource that isn't just trying to make a profit off of them. You're really trying to make sure that they're an informed customer or client, and that let them know that you are an expert in the industry. So just document that, turn it into blogs, turn it into videos, whatever you need to get that content out. And I know we even do as an agency, we all struggle with content, and that's a great first start.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for diving into that.
Yeah, no problem.
Then what can businesses do to stand out in their industries? Everyone's competing for whether it's screen time on a phone or the business in Kalamazoo or this region. What can they do to kind of stand out?
It's a simple answer. It's hard to execute. I think it's be unique. You really need to figure out what uniquely makes you you, and when you figure that out as a company and figure out what differentiates you from your competitors, that allows you to really define your brand and start to answer those brand questions. And so make sure that you're doing that. One of the things that we like to do, and this is where you can kind of do an audit against your own competitors, is we always talk about break free of the sea of sameness. One thing that you'll see in most industries, whether it's hairstylist or it's salads, which is what I work with, there are these what I call industry norms of how everybody's decided they're going to present their product and present themselves. And you can see it. You can see, that they're all presenting themselves in the same way and talking about their product in the same way. Really tear that apart and try to understand what those norms are, and then understand how you can kind of put some of them on their head and approach it differently. Because if you look different than your competitors, and if you sound different than your competitors, that's going to get attention. It's going to make people question why you sound different and why you look different, and it's going to at least make them stop and recognize that you are a different brand than what else is out there in the industry. So do that, define your tone of voice, and then be ready to change and adapt as you need to the current market.
So I know, people have been focusing in the last few months, obviously, on the global pandemic that's been happening. What would you recommend people do to kind of shift out of that space and focus on the future, even though the future is so unknown right now? What have you been advising your clients to do?
I think we've been advising our clients to kind of accept this as the new normal and be ready to pivot. And if you need to, even play out a couple different scenarios. For example, back to school is kind of a big thing for one of our clients, and we've tried to do that, but we know back to school is going to be different. We've acknowledged that in our social communications, and it makes it hard to plan for. But with a change in some of your language, which back to school is going to look different this year, and how do you approach it? We know that regardless, though, things still stay a lot the same. Even though we're back to school and it looks very different, everybody that has kids and is back to school that I know, me included, is busier, has less time. So how do you capitalize on helping them with that? That's just an example. So I think about it not from your side, but how can you help your clients get through this? This is their new normal too, and you need to pivot with them, and you need to be there for them in a way that will resonate, and be ready to change when things change back or forth the other way. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is just play out some scenarios, prepare. Like, where do you think things will be in 3 months? Where do you think they'll be in 6 months? And best or worse, then be prepared as a company to respond to that. So
I like that. So final question for you, Conan. If everybody on this call could do one thing today to kind of boost their brand, get themselves out there a little more, what would that one piece of advice you'd give be?
Well, the content one is a big one. That's going to help you organically and greatly. I would say the next thing is, if you're an existing brand, do an audit on yourself. Are you consistent in your communications? Are you happy with your communications? Also, make sure, do an audit on all of your channels. This is all I'm saying too, like if you don't want to spend, like if you just want to figure it out yourself before you jump into a big effort. Have you filled out your Google business profile? Is it up to date? Do you have enough reviews? Have you asked your clients for reviews? Do those kind of things, just general house cleaning to do it, and then start to do that audit, both of your customers and of your competitors, and look at what they're doing and how they're responding to the current market. Look at what seems to be resonating with them, and then ask yourself if you're doing that correctly as a brand, and how do you inject yourself into that in a way that's relevant and useful. I think the important thing right now too is how can you be useful to your consumer. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think those are really simple, maybe time consuming, but really simple things to kind of get the ball rolling and kind of do that, housekeeping and audit. So thank you for sharing, Conan.
Yeah, one last thing too on the time consuming thing, because that is tough.
Yeah.
I found that if you dedicate a half an hour to doing that versus, sit down and say, I'm going to do it all in a day, rather I'm going to set aside a half an hour every day of the week to do it. It's way easier, and it doesn't feel, you're eating the elephant one bite at a time versus trying to do it all in one sitting. So
makes it a little more manageable.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Conan,
Mm-hmm.
so much. We are going to turn things over to Katrina Reed, who is the Creative Service Manager at CSM Group. Katrina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So can you share with us a little about what you do at CSM Group?
Sure. So as Kelsey mentioned, I'm the Creative Services Manager. So I'm responsible for the execution of all of our marketing projects. So from copywriting to graphic design to photography. So I work really closely with our Marketing Services Manager to understand the specific needs of our client and figure out how to best help them tell their story and bring their project to life.
Awesome. Thank you. So another big question to start off with, I apologize on this Friday morning, but if someone is unsure about how they should be marketing their product or service, where do you suggest they start?
That's a great question. And I'm sure many of us on this call has felt overwhelmed at some point in time when it comes to trying to figure out how to best market a product or service. I know I certainly have. And through the years, I've kind of found a methodology that makes it a little less daunting. And the first thing that you should start with is understanding or identifying your audience. So if you're trying to market a product or a service to an audience that you're unfamiliar with or to customers that you haven't talked to before, it's going to make it much more challenging to sell. And so if you step back and first identify who that target audience is, it's going to help kind of frame your marketing approach, and it's going to help you appear more authentic to your customers because you're not trying to force something that doesn't really exist or make sense. And the other thing is make sure that you understand the problem that you're solving for your customer. So you never want to assume that you know your customer's pain points or assume that your product or service is just going to automatically magically make all of their problems disappear. So if you're unsure of your messaging or your approach to the market, you can always sit down with some customers that you trust and respect and have good relationships with and bounce that messaging and approach off of them and get their feedback. Because if anything, that's going to give you peace of mind that what you're about to market actually fulfills the need within that target audience.
No, I think that same thing as Conan was saying, it's all about your customer. It's knowing your audience, figuring out what they need, and then how to make the messaging fit, which I think is can be very difficult, right? Especially depending on if you're dealing with the people every day, your customers every day, or if it's more of an online interaction.
Correct.
So say you have to do a complete rebrand on a project, or you've just decided that like, hey, this isn't working. Where can people start, and what are some key elements that you should typically pay attention to when trying to kind of change the image or messaging of a product, service, or brand?
So we actually began the process of rebranding last year. And when we were doing our research, I came across this quote that said something along the lines of, a good rebrand is like cooking a meal. The more that you prep up front, the easier it's going to be kind of in the end game. And that's kind of how rebranding is. So I think a lot of people think that a rebrand is just the design elements. You know, it's a new logo, it's an enhanced website, it's a flashy color palette. But in actuality, where you need to start is by developing a solid brand strategy. So to use some construction terminology here, because that's what I know, a brand strategy is like the foundation, okay? So if you have a poor foundation, it's not going to be able to support the rest of the structure. So by starting with that brand strategy and developing a solid, you know, position, value propositions, mission, vision, value, then you can move on to kind of that competitive analysis and market research to understand how you stack up against your competitors and within the market. And then you can move on to developing buyer personas. So making sure that you're building those profiles of your ideal customers so that you really truly understand their pains and gains and how you can best message to them. Then once you have those elements in place, you can move on to the brand message and then on to the design elements. The other thing that's helpful is having brand advocates in your corner. And Conan touched on this as well, but those brand advocates really help generate that positive, impactful word of mouth marketing for you. And so I'm sure we've all been in the same boat. You know, you're much more prone to go out and buy a product or hire someone to do something if you've been referred to that company by a friend or a family member or a coworker. So again, having those brand advocates in your corner, have them help you kind of spreading that, you know, your business kind of message and things organically will help you out as well.
No, it's all about, you know, I feel like sometimes it's that delicate balance between, you know, there's certain signs that you see around town all the time, whether it's for, you know, a construction company or just a, you know, a grocery store that's around town often, but there's that balance of kind of being in everybody's face all the time and then having that word of mouth that's much more subtle. So it always seems like having that, you know, the relationships that can carry the brand and the message is easier than just plastering it everywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
So your team has been very effective at changing the perceptions within the construction industry through the new kids construction zone and kind of the drone and VR technology that you've been using. Can you explain more about this and then how your team has been able to accomplish this?
Yeah. So there has been this misconception of the construction industry for the longest time. You know, the remarks people often make is, well, it's dirty, it's unsafe, it's too physically demanding. But in actuality, the construction industry is one of the most innovative industries and has the most opportunities for career advancement and growth. And so our goal at CSM Group is to help educate that next generation of skilled workers and get them to say like, hey, construction is actually really cool. You know, there's a lot of opportunity here and I could see myself, you know, being a project manager and watching a project go from the ground up. And so kind of how we accomplish that is kind of promoting those innovative practices and technologies that we use, like our drone and 360-degree cameras. So when COVID hit, we realized we had a really unique opportunity in front of us. So many of us at CSM Group are parents, so we were stuck at home with children who admittedly were spending more time in front of the computer probably than they had before. And we started talking as a team and we're like, how do we take advantage of this? How do we create an educational tool that's online that makes it feel like a student is able to go on our job site, but safely from the comfort of their own home? So we took our 360-degree cameras and we walked through one of our active job sites. And we actually selected 180 East Water Street, which is a 7-story mixed-use project here in downtown Kalamazoo. And it's actually going to be the future home of Southwest Michigan First Office when it's complete. And we took that camera and we walked through the space and we took photos of some of the more unique areas of the building. So one spot in particular was the kind of large grandiose staircase that will be the focal point of the first floor. And we coupled that with GoPro footage. So we had one of our project managers put a GoPro camera on his hard hat, and he climbed all the way up to the top of the tower crane. And then we also added in aerial images and videos that we took with our drone to give that bird's eye view perspective of the building that no one else would ever see if they were just walking by on the sidewalk. And so we took all of this footage and all this material, and we built out this educational course. And we put it up on our website, and then we shared it with our entire customer base, our employees, our trade contractor partners, suppliers, vendors, you name it. We shared it with as many people as we could. We wanted this free educational tool to go out to as many students to help, again, bring awareness to the construction industry and the careers that were available. But what ended up happening, and that it was a very nice perk, but we hadn't planned on it, but it brought about a lot of brand awareness for us within the local market. And now with the success that that's had, we've already started looking towards how we can expand upon that. And we're going to start in a couple weeks here building out a course for older students, so 9th through 12th grade, and really focusing on that career readiness component. So, having interviews with tradesmen and tradeswomen on our job site, have them speak about their kind of skilled trades pathways, including educational resources on the skilled trades program in the area. So if they're interested in colleges with those types of programs, or if they want to get certified in a skilled trade pathway like welding, all of that will be right there for them. And what really made this successful for us was the support we had from CSM Group's leadership. So our leaders really support and foster a culture of innovation within the organization. And I know that there are a lot of business owners and leaders on this call. So I really encourage you to make sure that you're creating that space for your marketing team to give them the ability to be creative, to kind of give them permission to fail, if they try something new, but just give them the kind of creative reins to try something that's out of the box, because it could end up, developing a new product or service offering for you that really gains traction and kind of spreads like wildfire.
That's so cool. And I know that you are the official drone pilot of CSM Group. And can you talk a little bit about how the drone flying has turned into kind of a source of revenue for CSM Group or another service offering?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of helped launch our drone program about 4.5, almost 5 years ago. And at first it just started out as a way for us to capture those aerial images of progress of our job sites. So it was really just for internal project tracking. And then we started to share those photos on social media once we received permission from the client to do so. And we saw that we were getting a lot of interest, and people are like, hey, this is really cool. We get to see the side by side of the rendering with kind of the stage of progress that the project's in now. It's really cool. And then we had a customer reach out and they're like, hey, we're applying for this grant. It would be really cool if we could get aerial photos of our facility, but we don't want to spend thousands of dollars to hire a pilot, a photographer to accompany him. Would you be willing to come out and take those photos for us? I'm like, sure. We'd love to. And then it's just kind of snowballed from there. So, we have clients, again, are applying for grants, or if they just want to have really cool photos of their facilities for office decoration or any of their projects, we work with them to make that happen.
No, I think that's awesome. It's, something that was an out of the box idea that has now turned into something more that you can offer your customers, which I think is really neat. So one final question for you. What do you recommend businesses do in order to stand out?
We'll kind of hit on this too, but the one thing that helps is finding and leveraging your point of difference. And what I mean by that is, what is that one thing that you do really well that others don't? And so I chose this room today for a reason, and it's because I wanted this wall behind me to be my backdrop. And the reason for that is because our people are our greatest asset. So the 150 people that are on this wall behind me are what set us apart from our competitors. So we know that our level of expertise in our high performing teammates are what sets us apart. So we make sure that we incorporate that into our marketing approach so that we're establishing a personal connection with our customers between them and our teammates. Because like Hanan said, it develops that level of trust that makes them more comfortable with reaching out to you to talk about work. And then the other thing too is just making sure, and again, Conan hit on this too, but making sure that you have that consistent voice in the marketplace. So brands that are consistent in the imagery and the messaging and the tone of voice are far more successful than brands that kind of waffle between or don't really know who they are. So I talked about kind of implementing that brand strategy previously, which certainly helps out quite a bit of knowing what your brand voice is, but also creating a voice guide and sharing that with your organization so that all employees are communicating the same. So, and the reason why that's important is because no matter who your customer talks to within your organization, they're going to receive the same kind of customer experience regardless of who they're talking to and at what level of the organization. And again, it just builds that level of trust and respect.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Katrina. We're gonna kind of shift zones and go to Jessica Thompson, who is the owner of the Be Joyful Shop in downtown Kalamazoo. Jessica, can you tell us a little bit about your business for those who aren't familiar and what products you offer?
Sure. So thank you again. And I'm definitely appreciating Conan and Katrina's information this morning because I am on the absolute total other spectrum of business. And because it's basically just me and sometimes my husband and a bunch of teenagers who are making this happen. My business has transitioned from a single product that I was making by hand. Can you not hear me? I'm sorry. Is that better?
It's a little quiet.
Can you hear me now?
A little better, yeah.
Okay. I'll yell. Okay. So it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Fantastic. So we went from a single product that I was making myself to a brick and mortar within 3.5 years. And we offer alternatives to single-use plastic for you and your home.
Awesome. So you kind of mentioned this already, but as COVID was kind of ramping up, you were about to open your store in Kalamazoo. Now that you've experienced both the online only store and having a brick and mortar store, which do you prefer and why, and what are the pros and cons you've seen of both?
I definitely enjoy the face-to-face conversations that I can have with people. It's easier to explain the why and the reasoning behind what we do, as opposed to creating an online presence that shares that passion. And is that better? Okay, so switching from the online, which is great, but you can only share so much. And so you really have to put your personality, you have to put your brand, you have to put the whys behind what you do out there. And when you're able to have those face-to-face conversations that we were having at farmers markets and small craft shows and business fairs, to be able to do that daily with anyone who walks in off the street has been amazing. I am a people person. I love to talk about what we do, and I know this was touched on before, but you're sharing the reason. You're not trying to sell the product. You're sharing the why behind it. So I don't say, you should really buy this dish soap bar. I say, oh my gosh, did you know that there's 5 billion dish soap bottles that are made of plastic that end up in a landfill? This is why we do this, and it's great to have an alternative. So what alternative would you like to choose? Do you want to do a refill at our refill station? Do you want to have a dish soap block? And so we give options. What was the rest of the question?
No, I think you answered it. I think this transitions really well into kind of the next question I have. So you obviously are selling and branding yourself as a, focused on sustainability, whether it's, a sustainable lifestyle or a set of sustainable products. So how have you, I know you're saying face-to-face conversations are really helpful. How have you been able to kind of work with people to figure out how they can fit into that world of sustainability for someone who may not have had any experience with it before?
Yes. So I know that it was said before that you have to find your people, you have to find your market. And that's the interesting thing with my business, is that it can be anyone from 8 years old to 80 years old. My market is extremely wide. I have small children who come in that they're just bent on saving the world, and they bought all of their school supplies with us. And they're the absolute sweetest things on earth and make me cry. And then I had an 80-year-old grandma and grandpa come in just because they were walking down the mall with their grandchildren, wanted to know what the shop was all about. And they ended up in tears because of what their generation, quote unquote, had done. And they bought a few things because they wanted to help the cause. And so it's quite amazing to see that. So to be able to share what we have, what we offer, and put that out to such a vast array of people is an interesting thing. Again, I am only one person. I have 5 children. I have 3 stepchildren, and I'm running a new business. So I'm doing the best that I can, but the social media aspect has been amazing because, as all of you know, each platform reaches a different audience. And so that has been, for me, with a marketing degree back from '93 and hasn't done anything with it, has been really exciting to see. I post things on Twitter, I retweet them, and it hits a certain demographic of people. And then Facebook, they like to read articles, and they like to see the BBC, what they're writing about, and then I'll share, some different posts. Instagram is a little bit more about the aesthetic of everything. So I show what that can look like in your home. These aren't hard things to make a change. They want to see what it's going to look like, though, because it seems odd or weird or like a big hippie thing, and it's not. And we've reached out to several new platforms that I never in my life thought that I would be on, but here we are. So I think making sure that people know that these are easy things to do and that anyone can do them.
That is a perfect segue into my next question. And so for those of you who may not have ventured into the world of TikTok, I looked this morning and Jessica now has 45,000 followers and over 1 million likes on the platform. So Jessica, tell us your secret. How have you been able to use TikTok to leverage your business, and where does someone even start? Where did you start? How did TikTok become a part of your world?
So it was COVID, and I was stuck in the house with 6 teenagers. And it was a daily occurrence of just watching ridiculous videos. And for the most part, so for those that don't know, there are different sides, they say, to TikTok. You can be on the teenage side, you can be on the dancing side, you can be on the alt side. There's some weird ones too. I try not to watch any of those videos, but just like any social media, there's weird out there, so be warned. But my daughter said, you know, there's a lot of businesses out here, Mom. You should totally like do something. I don't know if she was teasing or not, but I did. And so I have trends that are out there, and I take whatever's trending, a trending song or a trending funny video, and I turn that into an eco video. And so everything is an eco-friendly type of spin on it. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous, but it has paid off. And they're really funny. I have several series on there now. So the Eco Mom is kind of my alternative character that I play, and she's hilarious, and she likes to give friendly tips in a very friendly mom-like way. But the funny thing that happened was the people from TikTok, so I have a code on there for a discount. So if you are on there, you'll see if you click on the link and there's a code for, and so that way I can track my metrics when it comes to sales. And to back up a little bit, in March we signed on our location downtown, and we were ready to open, or we were slated to open on April 3rd, and COVID shut everything down in Michigan 2 weeks prior to that. So what that meant was I now had rent and utilities and all that goes along with that, and no income whatsoever that we had set. I also had all of my products purchased. So being a small business, that was a lot of the savings that I had put aside for this. So it didn't really fall into the plan that we had. However, to jump back forward now, TikTok and the sales from that kept us. So my encouragement to any small businesses that are out there, if you're feeling like that's not for me, or that seems silly or scary, or I could never, that's what I thought. And I thought that platform was a bunch of 16-year-olds who danced and wore crop tops and were inappropriate. And I'm not wrong on that. However, it's also for 40-something moms of 1,000 kids who are opening small business. And I do have to say, most recently, I had a video that actually went viral, and Paris Hilton, of all people, commented on my video. And so it's been an interesting week, to say the least.
That's amazing. I know Jessica has posted your TikTok profile in the chat box, so anybody can check it out. But I have to say, the videos, I think they're super accessible, and congratulations. That's really, really cool.
Thank you.
So I have one final question for you.
Most of them are lighthearted and humorous. So I don't take myself seriously. So if anyone sees that and is like, oh, who does she think she is? I don't.
No, they're great. I think they hit a perfect tone. So one last question for you, Jessica. What is one piece of advice you would give yourself 2 years ago when it comes to marketing and branding? Is there anything you do differently, or something that you said, yes, I hit the nail on the head?
I feel like the things that I would keep going, and I definitely would do, our name is Be Joyful. And so whether that's the bright yellow that is in my logo, and I try to constantly have some piece of yellow on so that when people see me, they're like, oh, hey, there's the bee lady. But also the wording, the imagery, everything has a tone of happiness and joyfulness, because plastic pollution and pollution in general obviously is horrible and has an extremely negative connotation. It's ugly, it's bad, blah, blah, blah. And so my take on that is that we can be joyful that there are people and there are businesses and products who are trying to make a difference. And that's how I've always lived my life throughout a bunch of bad situations that have happened to me. I always try to be joyful in the situation, find that glimmer of hope, and hold on to that. So that I would definitely keep. And, it's a rare thing if you see me putting out pictures of like turtles with straw stuck up their nose and birds that are choked to death with things. That's the reality. You can go find that. The bright side of that, and how can we prevent those things? The thing that I would change is I would be more brave, and I would take those chances, and I would do the thing, whatever that looked like. I would do the thing that was scary at the time. When the opportunity for Catalyst came up, I did not feel that was a place that I needed to be. That was for businesses. That wasn't for somebody who made a food wrap in their kitchen. And turns out it was for me. And that was a turning point in my business, was winning that contest. And so to anyone out there, that's whether you are 6 months in or you're well established, to do the thing, whatever that is for you, that
Well, thank you, Jessica.
Or out of your realm. You never know.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great piece of advice to end on, is be brave. So thank you so much to all of our speakers, Kanan, Katrina, and Jessica, for joining us this morning and sharing such wonderful insights and tips and tricks. I think there's so many little nuggets that people can take away from today's conversation and implement immediately into their businesses. So thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. I also want to thank you all for spending your time with us this morning. We hope you have found this call to be beneficial, and we welcome any suggestions or ideas that you might have for future calls. So before we go our separate ways, I did have a few things I wanted to share with everyone. Today is the last day to apply for our new program, First Path. So for those of you who haven't heard about it yet, it is a part of our organization strategy to bolster our regional entrepreneurial ecosystem. So if you or anyone you know has been sitting on an idea that could be turned into a business, or are someone who is ready to turn their side hustle into their main gig, this program is for you. It will be a 6-week virtual program and will kick off October 6th. And Jessica has posted a link for the program in the chat box. If you're still looking for additional funding for your business because of COVID-19, you may be eligible for the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This program provides small businesses with working capital loans to help overcome the temporary loss of revenue because of COVID-19. Jessica has put a link for that in the chat box as well, and the contact information for the Small Business Development Center in case you have any questions about the loan. And finally, this was just recently announced, but Huntington Bank announced a $5 billion 5-year lending, investment, and philanthropic committee to help improve financial opportunities throughout the state of Michigan. So in the next several months, the bank will announce specific initiatives to support small businesses, as well as consumers and communities, with an increased focus on access to capital, affordable housing, and community lending and investment. So we've posted the link for that press release in the chat box, and if anything pops up on our radar that is specific to small businesses, we'll be sure to share on future calls. So with all of that said, our next small business series call will take place on Friday, October 23rd, and we'll focus on the topic of innovating to meet the market. So we will explore some ways our region's companies have continued to innovate and bring new products to market, despite the myriad of challenges they faced this year. I'll be sending out an invite to everyone on the call later today. My contact information has been shared in the chat box, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you again to Blue Cross Blue Shield for sponsoring this series, and thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on future calls, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all.